This week we're talking about how to write your research paper and how to write a scientific report. At this point in class, you've already done your literature review. You've actually turned in your methods section, so I'm going to comment on those very quickly, get those back to you, because this is just the gist of the study that you would do. So when you're writing a report, when you're writing your research study, you need to consider all of the topics that we're going to include this week on, how to write the research, your goals of your research, what types of reports can be written, displaying the research within reports and studies, reporting quantitative and qualitative research, ethics, politics, and reporting research, as well as plagiarism. And I know that you've already seen this. I haven't mentioned it necessarily as plagiarism, but this is with citing your research. You always have to cite everything that is not your own thoughts, words, feelings. The goal of any research is not to just discover something, but to communicate that discovery to a larger audience. That's the purpose of your research study, your findings, your tables. The report presents research findings and interpretations in a way that reflects some combination. You're going to combine your research goals. Maybe you're doing your research for someone else, your sponsor. What are the concerns of the research subjects? You always have to consider that when, especially you're doing experimental research, and even perhaps the concerns of a wider anticipated readership. Who will potentially read your study? Is it a technical report have you been, your sponsor, for instance, are you being paid by an agency, a government agency, a private foundation? Have they elicited you to do this study because they want the findings in order to make changes within their government, make changes within their corporation, or maybe to see that something's not working? So you will have a wider audience, a wider readership, most likely with any report or study. The main goals are to advance scientific knowledge, and all of these are what we discussed within your discussions, and I want to say that I'm very impressed because all of these are important, and I had you pick one and support why you thought that one was the most important of the goals. But there is no wrong answer within your post. So we want to advance scientific knowledge, directed to other scientists working in the field, other researchers within your realm. Value questions are traditionally set apart from the research process. You want to shape social policy. You want to use these results to influence or at least inform the policymakers and policy decisions. To have accurate ethical data and findings can help shape these policies, and the attention is paid to more policy implications. You also the goals are to organize social action. Participatory action research involves inclusion of some subjects as active participants in the research with the goal of bringing change in an organization under study. Like as I mentioned, if a corporation or an agency has elicited you to complete this study, then they're looking for making a change on your results. So many social scientists consider this goal as a non-scientific concern. Dialogue with research subjects, it's interesting that no one picked this as the main goal. This is more a paradigm. It's a methodology that emphasizes the importance of exploring how different stakeholders in a social setting construct their beliefs. So it's important to always have a good dialogue with the research subjects. If you're using the research subjects, as I say, if you're using interviews and you're collecting your own data, you're not using secondary data, the dialogue is always important because you want, as we've talked about before, you want your interviewees to feel comfortable, to respect you, to feel like they can be open and honest with you. Writing our research, we need to consider the following principles whenever we're writing research. We need to respect the complexity of the task and don't expect to write a polished draft in a linear fashion. I've told many of you this. Whenever you're writing a report and you're writing a study, you're writing a literature review, anything, put it down on paper. Develop as you write. don't sit there and get stuck on your introductory sentence. You can do that later. Just start putting down the words on paper. Leave enough time for dead ends, restarts, revisions, and so on, and accept the fact that you will discard much of what you write. If you save your first draft and then go back and look at your final, you will see that you have thrown out a bunch, you've moved stuff, you've rewritten, and this is accepted. This is anticipated. Writing principles continued. You want to write as fast as you comfortably can. There's some people, especially, we talk about not just a research paper. Here we're talking about a scientific research report. And as I said, you put it down on paper as it comes to you. So however it is that you feel that you need to do your own research, do you read literature? Do you combine it in your head and then write what stands out to you? Do you read one study and then write down what's important in that study and then combine them later? And at this point, you don't worry about your spelling or your grammar. That will occur later. Also, too, a great way is to have somebody that you trust to read what you've written. I always recommend this, especially in drafts that you've written over and over again. Many times you're just passing words because you've read them so many times that it's always helpful to either read it out loud, especially though to get someone, and maybe someone that's familiar in the field, to read what you've written. Write as you go along, especially if you're conducting surveys, and we talked about this before when we were doing interviews and questionnaires and meeting with your subjects. You write as you go. So, we talked about this in field research. After you've gone and you've conducted your research, you've collected your data, you need to write and report then so that you remember what you have. And then you can add all these segments together later. You can ease the burden of report writing in a number of ways. Draw on the research proposal and on project notes. It's your notes. A lot of people, I still use paper when I'm writing. I like to type out what I'm doing and print it out, and then I write on it. I scribble on it. I draw. I circle. I move things. And a lot of people don't. A lot of people just use the word processing program to reorganize and edit. Again, seek criticism from friends, teachers, other research, and it's constructive criticism. Reverse your outlining. After you've written, I stress this, and I didn't do this within this study, and I'm hoping many of you did, is always write your outline. And I used to not write outlines, especially when I was in high school and undergrad, because I thought they were a waste of time. But then I realized they help you organize your thoughts. And it doesn't have to be accurate. It doesn't have to be grammatically correct. It's just a brief draft of maybe what you want to do within your project. And then you can check your paper. Once you've completed it, this is what's meant by reverse outlining. Go back and look at your outline and see if it actually followed what you planned. Oops. Move into the types of research reports. As we've talked about, we have student papers and theses. This is what you're doing now. Some of you are actually even working on your theses throughout this time. But group projects, journal articles, and applied reports. These are all types of reports that research that you'll see and you have seen. When we talk about our student papers and theses, these are kind of self-explanatory. The audience for this project is usually your professor. It's important for you to seek feedback early. That's why I do require that drafts be submitted early, because it helps to get that feedback early. Also, too, there's nothing wrong at this point. I try to tell students this, and I really mean this. Ask questions. There's no stupid question. You might not understand something. You'd be surprised how many other students don't understand it either. And it might be just something simple within the directions, but it's helpful to just hear it, especially in online classes. Don't become too anxious for guidance. Many professors require research projects in part so that their students can work through, and at least somewhat independently, the issues that they confront. What I want to see in my students is I want you to make the decisions on your own. I want you to find your own errors. But that's why I don't want to rewrite your papers. I want to just point out, many times you'll see within my comments, I may say, reword this section, rework this, move this around, because this is your scholastic material. So I want you to take the most part in this, especially when you're writing a thesis. Group projects, these are pulling resources with those of several students in a group project. And I know you've done this, you probably did this within your undergrad work. I really promote this. It's difficult to do in an online class. I would like to try at some point to do this, and it becomes difficult. But the group projects, each student's role should be clarified at the outset. Group members should always try to help each other out. We shouldn't have just one person running the group. Complaints about other group members should be made to the professor when things just cannot be worked out. It's always good to work it out within your group, and if you're meeting in person, then you can do that. You can bring something up, or you can have a chat room, a wiki page, a Word document, and a online Word document where you can write comments, and that way, if somebody's not holding up their end or has not turning in something when it needs to be, you need to address them. You want to go to the professor when it's really impacting your overall completion. Each group member should have a clear area of responsibility. This is very important when you're doing a group project, that you meet with your group, beforehand, before you even begin anything, and decide who's going to do what. The Thesis Committee, and this will come up, some of you already know about this, after you pick your topic for your thesis, and this is something important. I'm going to go over this right now anyway, because I did within the orientation material that I'm not sure went through right, but there is a thesis guidebook, and I encourage everyone, if you don't have it, send me an email and I'll send it to you. I'm revising it a little bit, but it will help you, because the first thing you want to do is, when you have completed 18 hours of your graduate work at LMU, at that point you want to begin your thesis. If you're writing a thesis, there are a number of different ways you can do in order to graduate with the requirements. You have to do a major research project or take a comprehensive exam. Now, if you take the comprehensive exam, you're going to take 2 additional classes, but that's because the thesis class is 3 hours. It's a total of 6 hours that you take over your last 2 semesters. So if you're not writing that, you'll just take an additional elective. You can take it from even another program. But so the first thing, you should really start thinking about your thesis, about your project. Maybe you're going to do an internship, a case study, a program review. If you're any of this, you need to really start thinking about this within your first semester here at LMU. Talk to professors, ask them what they think. What are you interested in? So, and I've gone over this all, and as I said, I don't want to go into too much detail on this. I really can, as you can see. But so you will work with your committee chair, and right now I am the chair of your thesis committee. But of course, what that means is you have a committee that you will work with. And there will be other professors that are more inept in your possible study, and so therefore we'll use them as really your chair. I'm just going to be identified as that chair because I'm the one that's the professor over the thesis class. But what I want you to do really is to choose your topic and choose somebody that's very familiar with that. Community members should have complementary areas of expertise that each important for the research project. For instance, if you're doing quantitative research, you want a quantitative person. If you're doing qualitative research, you want a qualitative person. You also want someone that's familiar with your topic. If you're doing law enforcement, I'm not the best pick for that. I've never been in law enforcement. My focus is more on juvenile justice, mental illness. And so you might look at, anyway, you want to choose those people, and you want to identify them. And again, it's very important that you work with your community members. What we suggest is that you start off when you're writing a thesis within that first semester, that you write your literature review and your methods, and you send to your chair, who really does most of the editing there, but then you'll send it to your committee members as well and get their feedback. Now, journal articles are done a little bit different. They are all reviewed by your peers within the subject matter. So the process makes the preparation of an academic journal really unique. The editor will send submitted articles to 2 or 3 experts peers who are asked whether the paper should be accepted, should it be edited, should it revised and then resubmitted, should it even be rejected. So, and this process is all anonymous at most journals. It's not always the case. For instance, I've just submitted an article, and I was asked to choose my reviewers. So, and of course, it can't be within your institution, but anyway, it's a process that you go through. That's what the importance of these journal articles. They are reviewed by what we consider experts in the field, and most leading journals, have a rejection rate of over 90%. So when you get to that point in your career where you want to submit a journal article, and it could even be your thesis that you submit, or any other study that you've conducted, that don't be discouraged if it's rejected, as it is. Like you said, most of the leading journals, most of the higher scholastic peer-reviewed journals have a rejection rate. And there is one formatting style in criminology, and you'll see that on all of the websites whenever you start to submit your journal article. Organization of the article really resembles the organization of the research proposal that we talked about. You'll have an abstract, you'll have an introduction, and then your literature review. And as I said, we're going to talk more about our introduction to your paper. And as I've stated, I always do that last, because your introduction really talks about the problem that you're studying and your research strategy. And a lot of times you don't know that until you've completed your literature review as well as your methods section. So as we said a minute ago, you have your abstract. Also, again, let me point out, your abstract is not written until the end. Many times professors ask you, well, write me your abstract. Well, it's going to be more of a draft, because what the abstract does, if you've read these within the articles that you've reviewed, it is a summary of your research, and it includes the findings from your research. Well, you don't have those findings until you've completed it. But your abstract is at the beginning, and it's usually when you submit your article to a journal, that's what you submit separately, is your abstract. So you have your introduction, as I said, and then your literature review, where you have the most relevant literature that's really supporting why you're doing your study. You have your method, which everyone is working on now or submitted, where the research procedures are detailed. You're explaining to the journal, the reader, how you conducted your research. And when you do your thesis proposal, your method section will be that part where you're writing what you plan on doing. What do you propose that you will do within your research? And this changes. So I don't want anybody, if you're thinking of or working on your research, your thesis, that it's a draft. It's just what you're proposing to your committee, and they're experts. They're going to help you to refine that. So after your method section, you have your results. Within a thesis, these are all considered chapters, and so I think many times you've heard me even talk about that within your research paper, that you have your different chapters, but they're really sections within what we're doing now. So again, you have your results, and at the end of your results, this is where you have findings. You don't really have any discussion in this area. You have your graphs, you have your tables, and you are really just stating what you found. And then you have your discussion, and that's where you evaluate and interpret your results. And you want to connect with any theoretical implications that you have stated throughout the rest of your paper. And many times you'll address your theoretical implications within your literature review and within your method section. So you're really tying all this together and just explaining what the results that you reported, you want to now discuss them and evaluate them. And also at the end of any paper, you'll have your study limitations, and even sometimes you'll have suggestions for further research or suggestions on how to improve what you did yourself. And at the end of any article, report, thesis paper, you have your references, and these are all within the criminology and criminal justice. We use the APA, and right now we're using the 6th edition. Sorry for the cutoff right there, but sorry also for the links. So far we've talked about student papers, your thesis, and journal articles. Now we're going to talk about applied reports, and these are, as I said earlier, these are commissioned by a particular government agency, a corporation, a nonprofit organization, someone that has contracted you to complete this work. That some of the issues when you're looking at these types of report are the hired gun problem. Many people feel, well, this person is paying me or has contracted me to do this, and so therefore I have these constraints on what is the nature of the final report. Will the report even be used? And many times it's suppressed or distorted because it's not what the organization or agency, corporation was looking for. And many times in these types of reports, the conclusions are ignored. So you might be contracted, I say contracted, but you might be approached to complete this report and even hired to do it, and then you find that your conclusions are not even used, they're thrown out, and your report's not even published. An advisory committee to these reports, it can help the researcher avoid the problems of incompatible expectations for the final report and insufficient understanding of how to use the results. And this advisory committee is usually formed before the start of the project, and it represents various organizational segments for those that have a stake in the outcome of your research. And it can be used as a source of intelligence about how particular findings may be received, maybe just a sounding board for ideas, constructive criticism, even how the organization or agency will use the research findings, and can help the researcher work out any problems within their design, their implementation, their data collection. And you will see that when you can conduct your own data and your own collection, in your own, if you do a quantitative or qualitative study, you're going to find that there's always issues and problems, and it's really great to have an advisory committee, someone that can help you do this, and that's your thesis committee when you write a thesis. So displaying your research. We talked about this a little bit when we talk about our tables, our figures, our diagrams, our charts. We talked about this some within our quantitative data last week, I think it was. So you want to have a combined frequency display, and this is the distributions for a set of similar variables with the same response categories, and you present these together with common headings for the responses. So this is all done within your results section, and so you display it in a way that's easier to comprehend. And you also want to have compressed frequency display. This is really unnecessary percentages, such as those corresponding to the second value of a dichotomous variable, or it's eliminated and reduce the need for repetitive labels. Let me go back to one. Here we go. Now we're going to talk about, reporting qualitative research. And as we know, qualitative research is different from our quantitation because our quantitation is numbers. And as I said, you will have those in tables, usually with like headings. So when we talk about the qualitative, we're talking about more in depth. We're talking about text, and we're not talking about numbers. So the research reports that are qualitative, reflect a more holistic and reflexive approach of the qualitative project. You always begin with an introduction to your report, to your research, and this includes a background about the development of your topic, why the researcher is conducting this, the background of the problem, the focus of the study. that leads to our literature review. And this, again, includes attention to the types of particular qualitative methods that are used in prior research. So when you're doing a qualitative project, you want to try to find prior research that has also conducted qualitative methods within their study, and they may not have done anything what you did. That's the whole purpose. You always want to try to, within any research, have a new topic, a new venue, a new goal, but you also look for literature that's similar to your topic. And that's what you report within your literature review. Your method section, same as with a quantitation, you're going to describe how you conducted the study. And in this section, though, you really want to concentrate on how you accessed your individuals, the setting with where you interviewed. You want to include the approach that you used. How did you manage the relations? How did you work with your research participants? Also, how did you ensure their confidentiality? But it's the same as with a quantitation, but you're just describing how you conducted your interviews and collecting of your data. Your results section is obviously going to be different than quantitation, in that instead of having numbers, you're going to have text. So within your section here, you're going to look for those. You go through all of your pages and pages of notes and interviews and answers, and you're going to organize them according to similar answers. So you would take the similar information and organize it into certain sections and discuss it then. You would also use quotes from participants or from your notes. And it could be selected to support what you're saying within your results section. And this is always done as it isn't within direct quotes. You may have, it's great to look at a qualitative study that's been done where you can see how they have reported their data. But again, qualitative is text. You're not going to have, it's going to be all written word. And our mixed methods research that we talked about a couple weeks ago, reporting this is just a little bit different. Your method section, will still include subsections that introduce the types of methods. So, within your mixed methods, you're using two different types of methods. So you want to have them divided up. And you talk about the first one and how you conducted it, as well as your second one. The results section, this is distinguished findings from your qualitative and quantitative. So it's going to be also divided into sections where you'll have, you discuss and your quantitative results in one area and then your quantitative. And the discussion section is really going to bring all of that together. So you're going to present the implications and conclusions from both types of data. And so you might then have your subsections according to the implications of the analysis and the sections with which you studied. Does that make sense? That your discussion section now, you include you combine all of it together according to your topics that you researched. Of course, we always talk about our ethics, politics, and reporting of research. Our guidelines, you have to provide an honest accounting of how the research was carried out. Remember, there's no wrong way to do it. If you find something, and whatever you do within your methods and your research, you have to report it. So you need to evaluate honestly your strengths and weaknesses of your design. What did you find that didn't work? What did you find that did work? You want to refer to prior research and interpret your findings within the body of literature resulting from that prior research. And always maintain a full record of the research project. Always keep all of your notes. Sometimes, and it doesn't happen very frequently, but questions can arise after your research and after it's even it could be when you submit an article. They may be asking, well, exactly how did you do this, and where is this? So you keep notes of everything. You want to avoid lying with statistics or using graphics to mislead. And you see this sometimes where reports are only reporting that which supports their goal of their research. You don't want to do that. You want to report everything. Everything is a finding. And as I said this before within our quantitation, if your results are not statistically significant, that's a finding, and that's an important finding. And you always want to include, the sponsors of the research. Why are you doing this research? You don't want to hide that from anyone. You want to thank staff who made contributions. It depends on the type of research that you're doing, the type of report. You might do this in the very beginning within your acknowledgments, especially within a thesis. You see this in articles where they do it in a paragraph at the very beginning. You also can do it at the very end of your journal article. And be sure that the order of authorship, so if there's multiple authors within your study, that how those are reported or discussed in advance, and so that everyone agrees on which author is going to come first. You want recommended principles for the public through the media. You want to focus on issues of national concern, issues that are high on the public agenda. This way, not only will your research be more likely to be published, but it's also it's a way to communicate with the public and know really what are the needs, what are they looking for. And you see this, researchers, we do this all the time when we see things, even on news reports, on podcasts, in books, on journal articles, or just hearing reports of what people's concerns are, and therefore you might want to develop creative arguments that are clearly presented and devoid of technical language, because you want the public to understand. And you want to really present the big picture, whereby the arguments are organized and presented so that readers can actually see how the various parts are interrelated. You always want to think of who you're writing for, as we talked about a few minutes ago. You want your findings, your report, to be clear and concise so that anyone that reads it can understand it. And again, I'll say this, it's not always true if you're writing a scientific report for biology, because many times, of course, they're writing it for biologists and not for the general public. Lastly, as we talk about, and I've mentioned this, plagiarism. This is when everyone knows what plagiarism is, but this is when you present someone else's ideas or words as your own and take credit for it. And this is when you do not cite correctly. Anything, and then I say this, when you're doing a literature review, most of it is going to be cited. And even when you change the wording, when it's not a direct quote, you still have to acknowledge where it came from, whether you say according to Black 2016 blah 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 blah, or you have your citation at the end. You always have to give credit where credit is due, and this helps to maintain professional integrity, which is the foundation of ethical research practice. So always make sure you always, and this goes true with an idea. Let's say you were reading journal articles and came up with an idea of a research from someone else's. You want to acknowledge that idea through your APA and through your citations. How do you avoid plagiarism? As I've said, you have careful procedures for documenting sources. What I always recommend is when you begin writing your paper, if it's a direct quote, always put it in quotation marks and put your citation right there along with your page number. Do the same thing if you've changed the wording within it. Put the page number there, so that way when you're going back, because you may look at this, as you know, weeks, months later, and you look back and you read something and you're thinking, oh my gosh, where did that come from? I need some more information on that. Or you might doubt yourself. Did I change the wording here? Did I paraphrase? Or is this a direct quote? So always put that page number. Review your definition of plagiarism and how it's enforced. That means that you need to know what LMU's definition of plagiarism is, and it's within the student handbook. So, and keep focused on your goal of your social research methods, and you're investigating the social world. And remember what we talked about in the very beginning of this class, the goals of social research. So you want to stay focused on what your goal is here in your methods section. That's it. Yep. Any questions with anyone? Please, as I always say, send me an email. I'd be more than happy to do another lecture on anything else that's needed. send me an email. Please post within my office hours on Blackboard so others can read your can get the focus of your question and the answer.